Right hands. Right hand.
One nation, peace and unity.
Excellency President, Senate, President, National Assembly.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you, sir. Congratulations.
Thank you very much.
I am delighted to sign into law today the 2022 Appropriation Bill as well as the enabling 2021 Finance Bill. I would like to thank the Senate President, the Speaker of the House of Representatives, and indeed all the distinguished and honorable leaders and members of the National Assembly for the expeditious consideration and passage of these bills. I also appreciate the continuing cooperation and commitment of the Ninth National Assembly to the restoration of a predictable January to December fiscal year as provided for in the Constitution of the Federal Republic of Nigeria. The Finance Bill 2021 is particularly critical for the successful implementation of the 2022 budget. Its passage further underscores our firm commitment to regularly support federal appropriation bills with finance bills designed to facilitate their implementation. I equally appreciate the continued mutual understanding, collaboration, and productive engagements between officials of the executive and the legislative arms of government, which have made this expeditious consideration as well as passage of the bills possible. We must continue to sustain this partnership in the interest of our people in order to ensure the effective implementation of the budget and realization of its laudable objectives. As you will recall, I laid the 2022 Appropriation Bill before the joint session of the National Assembly on the 7th of October 2021 and forwarded the 2021 Finance Bill thereafter. This administration remains committed to the early presentation of the annual Appropriation Bill to the National Assembly to ensure its passage before the beginning of the fiscal year. The 2023 budget is going to be a transition budget. Work will start in earnest to ensure early admission of the 2023 to 2025 medium-term expenditure framework and fiscal strategy paper, as well as the 2023 Appropriation Bill to the National Assembly. Heads of ministries, departments, and agencies are to cooperate with the Ministry of Finance, Budget and National Planning, more especially with the Budget Office of the Federation, to realize this very important objective. The 2022 budget that I just signed into law provides for aggregate expenditure of 17.127 trillion naira, an increase of 735.85 billion naira over the initial executive proposal, for a total expenditure of 16.391 billion naira. 186.53 billion naira of the increase, however, came from additional critical expenditures that I had authorized the Ministry of Finance, Budget and National Planning to forward to the National Assembly. The Minister will provide the public the details of the budget as passed by the National Assembly and signed into law by me. As I mentioned during the presentation of the 2022 Appropriation Bill, the fiscal year 2022 is very crucial in our efforts to complete and put to use critical agenda projects, as well as improve the general living conditions of our people. It is in this regard that I must express my reservations about many of the changes that the National Assembly has made to the 2022 executive budget proposal. Some of the worrisome changes are as follows. A, increase in projected federal government independent revenue by 400 billion naira, the justification for which is yet to be provided to the executive. B, reduction in the provision for sinking fund to retire maturing bonds by 22 billion naira without any explanation. C, reduction of the provisions of the non-regular allowances of the Nigeria Police Force and the Nigerian Navy by 15 billion naira and 5 billion naira respectively. This is particularly worrisome because personnel cost provisions are based on agencies' nominal role and approved salaries and allowances. D, furthermore, an increase of 21.72 billion naira in the overhead budget of some MDAs, while the sum of 1.96 billion naira was cut from the provision for some MDAs without apparent justification. E, increase in the provision for capital spending, excluding capital share and statutory transfer, by a net amount of 575.63 billion naira from 4.89 trillion naira to 5.47 trillion naira. Nonetheless, provisions for some critical projects were reduced. These include 1. Reduction of 12.6 billion naira in the Ministry of Transport's budget for the ongoing rail modernization projects. 2. Reduction of 25.8 billion naira from power sector reform program under the Ministry of Finance, Budget and National Planning. And 3. Reduction of 14.5 billion naira from several projects of the Ministry of Agriculture and introducing over 1,500 new projects into the budget of this ministry and its agencies. F, inclusion of new provisions totaling 36.59 billion naira for National Assembly's projects in the service-wide vote, which negates the principle of separation of powers and financial autonomy of the legislative arm of government. G, the changes to the original executive proposal are in the form of new insertions, outright removals, reductions, and or increases in the amounts allocated to projects. I, provisions made for as many as 10,733 projects were reduced, while 6,576 new projects were introduced into the budget by the National Assembly. Reduction in the provisions for many strategic capital projects to introduce empowerment projects. The cuts in the provisions for several of these projects by the National Assembly may render the projects unimplementable or set back their completion, especially some of this administration's strategic capital projects. Most of the projects inserted relate to matters that are basically the responsibilities of state and local governments and do not appear to have been properly conceptualized, designed, and costed. Many more projects have been added to the budgets of some MDAs with no consideration for the institutional capacity to execute the additional projects and or for the incremental recurrent expenditure that may be required. It is surprising that despite the National Assembly increasing projected revenues by 609.27 billion naira, the additional executive request of 186.53 billion naira for critical expenditure items could not be accommodated without increasing the deficit, while the sum of 550.59 billion naira from the projected incremental revenues was allocated at the discretion of National Assembly. I signed the 2022 Appropriation Bill into law to enable its implementation to commence on the 1st of January 2022. However, I will revert to the National Assembly with a request for amendment and or amendment as soon as the Assembly resumes to ensure that critical ongoing projects that are cardinal to this administration and those nearing completion do not suffer a setback due to reduced funding. Despite the lingering adverse effects of coronavirus on budget implementation, I am happy with the success recorded in the implementation of the 2021 budget. The sum of 3.94 trillion naira that was provided for the implementation of capital projects by MDAs during the fiscal year has been released fully. To enable MDAs to complete the implementation of their 2021 capital project and optimize the impact of the capital budget on the economy, they have been allowed to continue to expand the funds released for their 2021 capital budget till 31st March 2022. I deeply appreciate the understanding and the speedy action of the National Assembly on this matter. As the 2022 budget will be the last full year budget to be implemented by our administration, its effective implementation is very critical for delivering our legacy projects, promoting social inclusion, and strengthening the resilience of the economy. The Ministry of Finance, Budget and National Planner will implement all measures required to ensure timely and targeted release of capital votes. All ministries, departments, and agencies are to effect early commencement of project implementation while ensuring productive use of funds provided for achievement of the objectives set for their sectors. Considering the incidence of new coronavirus variant globally, we will ensure timely implementation of measures provided for in the 2022 budget to contain the spread of the virus and protect our people. We continue to count on the collaboration of the state governments in our effort to protect the lives and livelihood of our people. To achieve the laudable objectives of the 2022 budget, we will further intensify our revenue mobilization efforts. I am optimistic about our ability to finance the budget considering the positive global oil market outlook and the continuing improvement in our non-oil revenues. To achieve our revenue targets, revenue generation agencies, and indeed all MDAs must ensure prompt and full remittance of collected revenues. Relevant agencies must also ensure the realization of our crude oil production and export targets. I also appeal to our fellow citizens and the business community at large to fulfill their tax obligations promptly. However, being a deficit budget, the specific borrowing plan will be forwarded to the National Assembly shortly. I count on the cooperation of the National Assembly for a quick consideration and approval of the plan when submitted. All borrowings will be judiciously utilized and invested in our future growth and prosperity. MDAs are to liaise with the Bureau of Public Enterprises and/or the Infrastructure Concession and Regulatory Commission to explore available opportunities for public-private partnerships, concessions, as well as climate finance arrangements to fast-track the pace of our infrastructural development. I thank the Minister of Finance, Budget and National Planning, the Minister of State, Budget and National Planning, the Budget Office of the Federation, and all who worked tirelessly and sacrificed so much towards producing the 2022 Appropriation Act that I signed today. Let me conclude by commending the understanding, sacrifice, and resilience of our people during these challenging times. As a government, we remain committed to improving the general living conditions of our people. We will continue to implement measures aimed at moderating the unintended negative effects of policies on the citizenry. I thank you most sincerely for your kind attention. May God continue to bless the Federal Republic of Nigeria.
Well, the driving force, thank you very much for that very important and relevant question. The driving force is our ability in the National Assembly, in the two chambers, to work very amicably and productively. And then, of course, our ability as a National Assembly, as an institution, to work with the executive arm of government in such a manner that the processing of the budget estimates, as will be led by the President all the time, are done in such a way that every arm of government, all the two arms, participate fully at the appropriate time. You recall that in 2019, December, for the budget 2020, Mr. President directed his ministers and chief executive officers of MDS not to travel at all until they defended their budgets. And that, of course, helped us a lot in the National Assembly. So the secret is cooperation, partnership, synergy, and that understanding and mutual respect. And of course, Nigeria is benefiting from that kind of relationship. So that is what in my judgment and opinion, works for us to be passing the budget at the time that we always feel is the appropriate time before the end of the year. And of course, Mr. President, congratulations to him for signing the 2022 Appropriation Bill today. Even though today is the last day of the year, but we have achieved that very significant, important date of signing before the end of the year. And let me also add here that, and this is, I hope doesn't spark any controversy, but it's a reality, is what I've observed. The ability of the federal government to have its budget passed and signed before the end of the year has made so many states to also work towards achieving that. And by today, you would have noticed that more than half of our states would have signed the budget 2022. And that is the kind of leadership that the federal government is giving to the subnationals. Thank you.
But the president is not happy with the major changes by the National Assembly. What would you have to say about that?
I thought you would ask us what the president is happy with, because he's happy with most things and not the few things.
With what he's not happy with.
Well, I'm coming to that, but I think the most important thing is Mr. President is happy with the majority of what the National Assembly has done, and that's the most critical thing that we need to focus on. As for the observations Mr. President has raised, this is a natural and logical tendency between the executive and the legislature. Sometimes our views on certain issues may not be necessarily the same kind of views that the executive would have and hold on any particular matter. So I don't think what the president did by raising some observations as something that we should worry about. I'm happy that the president signed the budget in the first place, and he said he's coming back to the National Assembly to seek for amendments or amendments, and this is natural, logical legislative process. So I'm happy that we have done our own part in our own way. This is based on judgments. When we ask for more resources coming from the independent sources, especially from the government-owned enterprises of about 400 to 500 billion, is because we believe that these government-owned enterprises should contribute even much more. In fact, I hold the opinion that they should have contributed about $1 trillion at least, not 500 billion or so. So I believe that the National Assembly was right in its judgment, but there's nothing wrong in the executive arm of government coming back to the National Assembly to see how we are able to dialogue and go through the process and see where the misunderstanding is. But I don't think that is supposed to be worrisome development for us.
To monitor it.
Well, first of all, thank you very much. Every year's budget is an improvement on the last one. So the transition budget which the president spoke about, as you heard him earlier, they're even going to bring it earlier in 2023, which gives us ample time, more time to work on it, improve on it, and make it a seamless budget with seamless execution and implementation. I don't think I have a problem with 2023. 2023 budget is going to come, it's going to go, and we're going to work on it, just like we've been working on the other budgets.
Thanks for checking out SYMFONI on YouTube. Please be sure to subscribe and like our videos for updates.